Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me. Today, we explore what might happen if a being of absolute power was dropped into the broken world of Fallout. This is the story of a man too strong for his own good, a hero whose greatest enemy is his own boredom. We'll follow Saitama, the one-punch man, as he searches for meaning in the ruins of civilization, only to find that his casual strength is more destructive than any nuclear bomb. What happens when a man who can end any fight with a single blow enters a world defined by endless struggle? And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel. But only if it truly resonates with you. He appeared without a sound. One moment, the sun beat down on the cracked earth of the Mojave. The next, a man in a yellow jumpsuit was standing there. He wore a white cape that was already gathering dust. He had a perfectly bald, perfectly ordinary head. He blinked slowly, looking at the two-headed cow in the distance. The Brahmin stared back with four dull eyes. The man Saitama felt nothing. He had been in the middle of a grocery run. Now he was here. The air was hot and tasted like grit. It was a new place, but the feeling was old. It was the familiar ache of boredom. He began to walk. His red boots crunched on gravel and forgotten asphalt. A town appeared on the horizon. It was made of scrap metal and desperation. As he got closer, he heard screaming. A creature stood in the middle of the only street. It was massive, reptilian, with claws like sharpened car doors. People in patched leather armor fired uselessly at its thick hide. They called it a Deathclaw. The name seemed dramatic. The creature roared, a sound that shook the rust from the corrugated tin walls. It swatted a person aside. The body flew through the air like a broken doll. Saitama watched. He felt a familiar flicker of responsibility. He was a hero for a hobby. This was part of the job. He sighed. He walked forward, past the terrified townsfolk who now stared at him. The Deathclaw turned its attention to the newcomer. It saw a small, strange meal. It lowered its head and charged, shaking the ground with every step. The monster was a blur of speed and muscle and rage. Saitama raised a fist. He did not brace himself. He did not focus his energy. He just punched. There was no grand explosion. There was only a wet popping sound. A red mist instantly coated the side of a building. The Deathclaw was simply gone. Bits of bone and meat rained down on the dusty street. The charge, the roar, the terror, it all vanished in a single silent moment. The townsfolk were frozen. Their rifles hung limp in their hands. They looked at the red smear on the wall. Then they looked at the man in the yellow suit. He lowered his fist and looked at his knuckles. A tiny speck of blood sizzled and evaporated. He felt that old sinking feeling. He had hoped for something more. He turned to the stunned settlers. "Is there a sale on cabbage today?" he asked. They just stared. Their faces were a mix of awe and terror. One of them, a man with a scarred face and a laser rifle, slowly lowered his weapon. What are you?" he stammered. Saitama looked around at the desolate landscape, the brown hills, the dead trees, the endless empty sky. "I am just a guy who's a hero for fun," he said. The answer meant nothing to them. He sighed again. "Where is the nearest city?" They pointed him east toward a distant, broken skyline. They warned him of raiders, of giant insects, of men in armor who served a bull. They told him the water was poison and the air could kill. He nodded politely, not really listening. Poison did not seem to affect him. Nothing really did. He thanked them and started walking again. The wasteland was vast and quiet. He passed skeletons in rusted-out cars. He saw strange, green-skinned giants fighting with men in salvaged power armor. He walked right between them. One of the giants swung a huge hammer at him. Saitama caught it. The giant's arms shattered from the feedback. The men in armor trained their weapons on him, shouting something about technology. He ignored them and kept walking. He felt a strange tingling sensation all over his skin. A small device he had taken from a dead prospector was clicking frantically. The man had called it a Geiger counter. It was supposed to warn of something called radiation. Saitama looked at his hand. Nothing seemed different. The air tasted the same. The boredom felt the same. He walked through a crater filled with glowing green sludge. The counter screamed and then fell silent, broken. He waded through the ooze, which came up to his knees. It was warm. That was all. He stepped out on the other side, his red boots dripping with glowing waste. The sickness of this world, the invisible fire that consumed all life, could not even touch him. He was too strong to be changed. He was too strong to be part of anything. Have you ever wondered which of the wasteland's corruptions would claim them first? Drop your theories in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in thinking about this. His new quest was not for justice. It was not for peace. It was for a distraction. In the ruins of a small city, he found a crumbling building with a faded sign, Hubris Comics. Inside, most of the paper had turned to dust. Shelves were overturned. Skeletons in chairs sat before moldy pulp. But in a corner, protected by a metal desk, was a single, partially intact comic book. It was called Grognak the Barbarian. He picked it up. The pages were brittle. The art was simple, crude. He read about a warrior in a savage land, fighting monsters and sorcerers. It was silly. It was childish. But for a moment, a tiny fractional moment, he felt something. It was the ghost of an old excitement. He decided this was his new purpose. He would find more. He would collect every comic book and manga left in this dead world. It was a goal. It was better than nothing. He walked out of the comic shop and saw a group of soldiers. They wore blue and brown, with flags showing a two-headed bear. They were called the NCR. They were pinned down, fighting a losing battle against a horde of giant mutated scorpions. Saitama watched for a moment. The soldiers were brave. They were also dying. He walked into the middle of the fight. The scorpions turned on him. Their stingers were the size of spears. He punched the ground. He had not meant to hit it hard, but the earth cracked. A shockwave erupted outwards, silent and devastating. The scorpions were thrown into the air, their carapaces shattering. The ground for 100 yards in every direction was turned into a smooth, glassy bowl. The NCR soldiers stared, their mouths open. The battle was over. Their enemy was gone. The very landscape had been rewritten. The commanding officer approached him cautiously. "In the name of the new California Republic," she said, her voice shaking. "Who are you?" Saitama held up his comic book. "I am looking for more of these," he said. "Have you seen any?" The officer looked at the comic, then at the crater, then back at the strange bald man. She tried to explain the importance of their war. She spoke of territory, of resources, of ideology. She offered him citizenship, a rank, a lifetime supply of caps. She promised him worthy enemies. She pointed to a fortress in the distance, a place called Hoover Dam, where a great battle was to be fought. She said his power could save their civilization. Saitama looked at the dam on the horizon. It was big. He looked at the comic book in his hand. The story was simple. He looked at the officer. Her eyes were full of hope and desperation. "Is there a library there?" he asked. The officer's face fell. She did not understand. None of them could. They saw a savior, a weapon, a god. He was just a man looking for something to read. He left them there, in the glass crater he had made by accident. He walked towards the broken city of New Vegas. He had heard the buildings there were tall. Maybe some of them were bookstores. He walked past encampments of armored knights who called themselves the Brotherhood. They demanded he surrender his technology, meaning his suit. He walked through their walls. He walked past armies of men dressed like ancient Romans. They tried to enslave him. He flicked their leader on the forehead. The man who called himself Caesar flew backwards and did not stop. Each encounter was the same. They saw his power and wanted it. They saw a tool to win their wars, to enforce their beliefs, to save their dying world. They could not comprehend his emptiness. They could not understand that their grand struggles were meaningless to him. Their strongest weapons, their most terrifying monsters, their deadliest poisons, they were all just boring. He was an outside force, an equation that could not be solved. He broke their world just by walking through it. He was not a hero. He was not a villain. He was a spectator, and the show was terribly dull. He hoped the next city would have better stories. The lights of New Vegas were a lie. From a distance, they promised life. A city that had survived the old world's death. Up close, the lie fell apart. The glamour was a thin sheet of gold over a core of rust and rot. Beggars with missing limbs and hollow eyes lined the streets outside the main gate. The air smelled of cheap booze and desperation. Saitama walked towards the entrance to the strip, a high wall patrolled by robots. The robots were tall, single-wheeled machines with cartoon faces on their monitors. They rolled in front of him, blocking his path. Their screens displayed stern, unblinking faces. "Halt!" one of them said, its voice a synthesized monotone. "Credit check required for entry." Saitama looked at the robot. He had no money. He had nothing but his suit and his comic book. "I am looking for a bookstore," he said. The robot repeated its demand. "Credit check required for entry." Saitama considered punching it, but it seemed like too much effort. He decided to just walk past it. As he took a step, the robot's screen changed. A new face appeared. It was the face of a man, old and calculating. The voice that came from the robot's speaker was different. It was human, filled with dry amusement. "Hold on, Victor," the voice said. "Let our guest through." The robots rolled aside. The gates opened. "I have been watching you," the voice continued, speaking from every robot nearby. "Your journey across my desert has been disruptive. Please come to the Lucky 38 casino. We have much to discuss." Saitama shrugged. Maybe this person had a library. He walked into the strip. The glitz was overwhelming. Neon signs buzzed and flickered. The sounds of slot machines and sad music filled the air. It was a loud, bright, lonely place. He found the Lucky 38. It was the tallest tower, a needle piercing the sky. Inside, a robot led him to an elevator. He was taken to the penthouse, a luxurious apartment with a panoramic view of the entire city. A massive screen dominated one wall. The face of the old man appeared on it. "I am Robert House," the voice said, "the master of New Vegas, and you are an impossibility." Mr. House explained what he had seen. He had watched through his security network as Saitama erased a Deathclaw. He saw the crater where an NCR skirmish had been. He had registered the seismic event when the leader of the Legion was launched into the stratosphere. House was not afraid. He was intrigued. He saw power that defied physics, a force that could sweep the board clean. "I have a proposition," House said. "The other powers in this region are an annoyance. The NCR are bureaucratic fools. The Legion are savage throwbacks. The Brotherhood of Steel are religious zealots hoarding technology they don't understand. Remove them for me. Ensure my undisputed control over the Mojave. In exchange, I will give you anything you desire." Saitama listened patiently. He wasn't interested in politics or control. "Do you have any comic books?" he asked. Mr. House paused. "Comic books?" he asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "Yes, the paper kind, with pictures." House's expression became analytical. "A collector. How quaint. I have the location of every pre-war library, every comic shop, every newsstand in this entire region stored in my database. I even have digital copies of nearly every publication from before the Great War. This includes a complete archive of Japanese manga." Saitama's eyes widened, just a fraction. Digital copies weren't the same, but it was a start. "Okay," Saitama said. "Who do you want me to talk to first?" House directed him to a place called Hidden Valley. It was the main bunker for the Brotherhood of Steel. He told Saitama they were dangerous, armed with the best weapons of the old world. Saitama found the bunker hidden inside a chain-link fence surrounded by rocky canyons. He knocked on the metal door. A voice from an intercom told him to leave. Saitama said he was told there might be books inside. The voice laughed, then told him he would be shot if he did not vacate the premises. Saitama pushed the door. The reinforced steel buckled and tore from its hinges. Alarms blared. Men and women in bulky power armor came running, their laser rifles glowing with energy. "Identify yourself, civilian." Their leader, a paladin with a painted insignia, yelled, "You are trespassing on Brotherhood of Steel property." Saitama walked past him, deeper into the bunker. "Just looking for a library," he said. They opened fire. Red beams of concentrated light washed over him. His yellow suit was singed, but he felt nothing. It was like standing in a warm breeze. He kept walking. They fired missiles. The explosions filled the corridor with smoke and fire. When it cleared, he was still standing there, looking annoyed. "This is getting distracting," he said. The paladins fell back, their discipline breaking into fear. They had never seen anything like him. Their armor could withstand rockets. Their weapons could cut through steel. But this man, he did not even flinch. Their faith in technology was shattering. He reached the heart of the bunker, a large chamber with a humming nuclear reactor. He saw shelves, but they were filled with technical manuals and data holotapes, not comics. It was another dead end. He felt a surge of disappointment. He turned to leave, but he tripped over a loose piece of flooring. His arm flailed out to catch his balance. His hand hit the reactor's containment shield. There was a soft crunching sound. A spiderweb of cracks appeared on the armored casing. Then, the entire reactor imploded. A silent, violent vortex of energy pulled everything in the bunker towards the center. The walls, the floors, the paladins in their mighty armor. It was all crushed into a single, dense point. The entire mountain above the bunker collapsed inwards, creating a new, perfectly circular crater in the desert. Saitama stood in the middle of it, covered in dust. He had not meant to do that. He sighed. This world was very fragile. If you had Saitama's power in this moment, would you side with House's cold logic, the NCR's flawed democracy, or just walk away from it all? Let me know your choice in the comments. He walked out of the new crater, leaving the Mojave chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel as nothing more than a footnote. Word of the event traveled fast. The NCR patrols near the area reported the mountain was just Gone. Mr. House watched from his tower, a flicker of something close to fear on his digital face. He had asked a man to remove a faction. The man had deleted a mountain by accident. He had unleashed a force he could not possibly comprehend, let alone control. Saitama continued his search. He wandered into a ruined town where he saw a strange man in a clean, futuristic trench coat. The man was fighting a group of raiders with impossible speed and precision. He moved like a machine, his shots perfect, his movements economical. This was a Corsair, an elite synth from the secretive institute, sent all the way from the Commonwealth on a recovery mission. The Corsair dispatched the raiders and then turned its cold, analytical eyes on Saitama. Its internal sensors registered a being of unknown origin and impossible energy readings. Subject identified, the Corsair said, its voice devoid of emotion. You are an anomaly. You will be acquired for study. Surrender now. The Corsair raised its plasma rifle. Saitama just looked at him. Do you have any manga? He asked. The Corsair tilted its head. The question did not compute. It was an irrelevant variable. Cease resistance, it said, and fired a bolt of green plasma. The shot hit Saitama in the chest. It felt like a bug bite. Saitama looked down at his suit. Now there was a small black smudge on the yellow fabric. Hey, watch it, he said, frowning. This is my only suit. He punched the Corsair. He did not punch hard. It was a normal punch. But for the Corsair, it was the end of everything. Its synthetic body, its advanced combat chassis, its biomechanical brain. It all turned to vapor. The plasma rifle clattered to the ground, its plastic casing melted. Back in the Commonwealth, deep beneath the earth, the Institute's scientists stared at their monitors in horror. The Corsair's life signs, its tracking data, everything had simply ceased to exist. They had a single garbled image of a bald man in a yellow suit, and then nothing. A new fear took hold in their sterile, controlled world. There was something in the wasteland that was beyond their science. Saitama walked away. He was no closer to his goal. He had erased one of the most powerful military forces in the Mojave, and one of the most advanced androids ever created. He had done so without thought, without malice, without effort, and it meant nothing. The emptiness inside him was growing. It was a cold, heavy thing. He eventually found his way back to New Vegas and stood on the observation deck of the Lucky 38, looking down at the lights. He had access to House's database now. He could read all the comics he wanted on a screen, but it wasn't the same. He wanted the feel of the cheap paper. He wanted to see the faded ink. He wanted to find a piece of a world that cared about silly heroes fighting silly monsters. This world did not have those. It had only survivors. It had factions fighting over scraps. It had desperation and decay. His power made him a god here, but it also made him a ghost. He was an observer, trapped behind the glass of his own strength, unable to touch, unable to feel, unable to connect. The wasteland had not corrupted his body with its radiation. It was corrupting his soul with its emptiness. He sat in the dark of the penthouse, the glow of the giant monitor reflecting off his bald head. He scrolled through files, thousands of them. Grongnak the Barbarian, the Silver Shroud, Man to Man. He found digital archives of pre-war Japanese manga, entire series preserved as cold, perfect data. He read a few chapters. The stories were just as he remembered. A hero gets strong. A villain appears. They fight. The hero wins. It was simple. It was clean, but there was no joy in it. The thrill of the hunt was gone. The satisfaction of finding a rare issue in a dusty ruin was replaced by the sterile click of a mouse. He had his prize, the thing he had been searching for, and it was as empty as everything else. Mr. House's voice came from the speakers, cutting through the silence. Your side of our bargain is not yet complete, he said. The old man's voice was strained, the confidence replaced with a carefully managed anxiety. The NCR still occupies Hoover Dam. The Legion still gathers at their fort. My calculations suggest your methods would be most effective in resolving these final variables. Saitama turned away from the screen. He was tired. Not physically tired, but a deep spiritual exhaustion. Fine, he said, but I'm not doing any more after this. He just wanted to find a quiet place. Maybe a cave. He walked to Hoover Dam. The scale of the battle was immense. 2 armies, thousands of soldiers, clashed on the narrow strip of concrete. Explosions rocked the structure. Laser fire crisscrossed the air. Men in the armor of the NCR fought with men dressed as Roman legionaries. It was a war for the soul of the Mojave, a final bloody struggle for a future that was already dead. Saitama did not care. His goal was on the other side. A location marker on House's map indicated a high probability of a pre-war comic book distribution center in the ruins of a town just past the dam. He started walking across the dam. He walked into the heart of the battle. The soldiers on both sides stopped fighting. They lowered their weapons. A strange silence fell, broken only by the hum of the turbines deep within the dam. They stared at the man in the goofy yellow suit walking calmly through the war zone. Bullets sparked off his skin, doing nothing. A plasma bolt hit his cape and dissipated. He was an island of absolute calm in a sea of chaos. He was almost to the other side when a whistling sound grew loud. A Legion artillery crew miles away had fired a shell. They were not aiming for him. They were aiming for the NCR command post, but their aim was poor. The shell arced through the sky, heading directly for Saitama. He heard it coming. It was just another annoyance, another loud noise in a world full of them. He turned, his face a mask of utter boredom. He punched the shell. It was not a serious punch. It was not even a normal punch. It was a flick of the wrist, an afterthought. The shockwave, however, was absolute. The air itself became a solid wall. The artillery shell and the air around it were superheated into plasma and ceased to exist. The wave of force expanded outwards. It hit the Legion's camp on the far shore, and the entire fortified encampment, the tents, the barricades, the soldiers, the slaves, was scoured from the rock. It hit the NCR's positions, and their bunkers, their vertibirds, their heavy infantry were all thrown back like toys. The shockwave hit the dam itself. The massive concrete wall, a monument of the old world's strength, groaned. Cracks the size of cars spread across its surface. Metal supports, thick as ancient trees, snapped with reports like thunder. Then, with a great final sigh, Hoover Dam broke. Water from Lake Mead, held back for centuries, surged through the new gaps. A wall of water, a biblical flood, roared down the canyon. It swallowed the battlefield, washing away the living and the dead without distinction. The Great War for the Mojave was over. There was no winner. There was only the roar of the water and the silence that came after. Saitama stood on a remaining piece of the dam, watching the destruction he had caused. He had ended a war. He had shattered a civilization's greatest prize. He had redrawn the map of the wasteland. He had done it all because he was annoyed by a loud noise. He felt a familiar hollow ache in his chest. The comic book distribution center was now at the bottom of a new, violent lake. His quest was over. He had failed, or maybe he had succeeded. It did not seem to matter. He was too strong. Too strong for the monsters. Too strong for the armies. He was too strong for the very ground they stood on. His existence was a bug in the code of this reality, a rounding error that broke every equation. He looked up at the pale, washed-out sky. There was nothing for him here. There was nothing for him anywhere. The boredom had finally become a perfect, crystalline thing. It was a despair so pure and so total that it felt like a kind of enlightenment. He finally understood. As long as he was this strong, he would always be this alone. He could not find a home in any world because his presence would always break it. A thought entered his mind. It was a stupid, desperate, ridiculous thought. What if he could punch his way out? What if he could punch reality itself? He floated off the broken dam, rising into the air. Below, the few survivors of the flood stared up in terror and disbelief. They saw a god hanging in the sky, a silent bald deity in a ridiculous costume. He was the architect of their salvation and their doom. Saitama paid them no mind. He looked at the empty space in front of him. He pulled back his fist. For the first time since he had arrived, his expression changed. It was not a look of excitement or of anger. It was a look of profound, tragic resolve. Serious series, he whispered to the empty air. Serious punch. His fist shot forward. It connected with nothing and with everything. A lone prospector watching from a ridge miles away saw it happen. For a single, impossible moment, the sky tore open. It did not explode. It ripped like paper. Through the tear, the prospector saw things he could not understand. Colors that had no names. Shapes that defied geometry. A brief, silent glimpse into the machinery of all that is. Then the hole snapped shut. The man in the yellow suit was gone. The sky was empty again. The roar of the broken dam was the only sound. The wasteland was quiet. Saitama left behind a broken dam, shattered armies, and a power vacuum that would plague the Mojave for centuries. He became a myth, a ghost story whispered by survivors. They called him the Bald God, the man who broke the world. He was a cautionary tale, a mystery that could never be solved. He came looking for a hobby. He came looking for a feeling. He left only a crater and an eternal echoing silence.